Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am in an undisclosed location somewhere near Pittsburgh Steelers training camp here in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. And I promised all of you I would come around with some updates from the later week of training camp here, and I have some observations after seeing some things with my own eyes that could put together with all of the things you may have seen, read, or yeah, even seen otherwise, like on Twitter and stuff like that. Man, I'll tell you, the St. Vincent staff a little rough on, and not that I'm a big fan of recording video and reposting it out on the internet, but you're not permitted to do that, and I feel dirty doing it because the Steelers are working on very specific things. And as you know, some teams are very secretive. They don't even have open practices, or if they do, there's very select dates that they do that. So the Steelers are very open with allowing fans to come and participate out there at St. Vincent's College, and I don't like to betray that trust. But anyways, hopefully the audio and video holds up here. Working remote, it's been a little while since I've done one of these outside the confines of my normal little Steelers cave. So get on with this. Just, yesterday's practice, Thursday's practice, we're heading into Friday Night Lights, the big stadium, high school stadium practice that the Steelers hold yearly. Usually have an upwards of 12,000 fans in attendance there, and that'll be a padded practice. So the Steelers had some padded practices earlier throughout the week. Mike Tomlin did not put the guys in pads yesterday, and furthermore gave some veterans a day off. So for those of you who are out there that pay attention, very, very well covered, Bob Labriola, as many of you should. If you don't know, put him into your virtual Rolodex for those that actually know what a Rolodex is, because Bob covers the team like no one else. Excuse me. And he's, of course, he's employed for the team, so he's not going to say certain things. A lot of people will say he shills. These people say I shill, and I'm all sunshine and rainbows. But there's a lot of positives coming here out of camp, out of the things that I saw, and you can put two and two together. But I can maybe elaborate on a few things Bob may not be as forthcoming with sharing, but if you did happen to read his report on Steelers.com, you will have learned that Deontay Johnson and Allen Robinson were not practicing yesterday. Isaac Seumalo got a Veterans Day off, as did Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Patrick Peterson, and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Something personal or something going on there. But Mike Tomlin reported no new injuries, nothing like that. Of course, I believe the last time I recorded, or it just happened after I went off the air, but Corey Trice, 7th round cornerback, 7th round draft pick cornerback for the Steelers, hoping to make the team out of Purdue. He probably would have been higher than a 7th round pick, but he had the physical traits and whatnot, but some injury history and just bad luck. His season has ended. They placed him on injured reserve. When that happens during training camp, before your final 53-man roster cuts, he's not eligible to return during the season. So rather unfortunate. For those of you who have been here with me before, when I do some of these camp reports, my list is kind of short, and that's because it's really unlike last year. The camp battles, Brian and I talked about this, Flash and I talked about this. Not as many battles going on, and then it's really hard when you have the veterans that are sitting out. You also don't have the padded practices. So swing back around. By all means, I got good stuff to talk about here today. However, swing back around early next week, because I'll be able to cover Friday Night Lights and the weekend practices and give you some more further observations. Particularly, a lot of people want to know about Darnell Washington, Mount Washington up against TJ Watt. Excuse me, froggy throat. It happens, and I won't say these are the most ideal conditions to record in, but it'll do, hopefully, get the camera position in such a way you don't see all of my junk hanging around everywhere. Just lots of Steelers crap. So let's get on with number one, man. I had to print out a roster, double-sided, 90 names. There's a lot of new numbers out there. There is every year, and you're like, oh, who is that? But over the last 2 years, the Steelers have really made a lot of strides in really reshaping this roster. A lot of people will say that's a rebuild. I can't disagree. I mean, you're moving on from Ben Roethlisberger to Kenny Pickett, and let me say, Kenny Pickett, the Steelers getting him, we felt at pick 20 overall last year, was a steal. No pun intended there. There's a lot of people around the league that are already kind of hinting at, you let the Steelers do this. They gave up no further anything, and they got a franchise guy. Kenny Pickett, to me, for whatever reason, you know, I'm a 90s era growing up with football. So, 41 years old. So the Bill Cowher Steelers really resonate with me more than Chuck Noll and, or Chuck Noll for me and Bubby Brister and some of those guys is a very distant memory. But I'm watching football in the 90s, and of course the Dallas Cowboys were the kings back then. And I can't get this out of my mind. I keep saying this. My cousin Brad hanging out with me yesterday, and he don't take notes or anything, but just our observations. And the guy that Kenny Pickett reminds me of most people don't give credit to this dude. I mean, he's gotten credit, obviously. He's got Super Bowl rings, et cetera, et cetera. He's got all the stats, former first-round pick, and that's Troy Aikman. And you really remember him because he's on TV all the time. He does the color commentary and everything else these days. Where did he move around to now? I can't even remember. Fox, and then what? Over to I can't even remember now. But anyways, Pro Football Hall of Fame, College Football Hall of Fame, and you'd be like, Joe, it's like people know who Troy Aikman is. Yeah, but when you're talking about like great quarterbacks over the years and historically, you think of Peyton Manning, you think of Dan Marino, you think of maybe Steve Young, Joe Montana. You're going to throw Drew Brees into that recency kind of bias, right? Tom Brady, of course, maybe the greatest of all time to do it. A little easier to say now when he doesn't play. Still makes me throw up in my mouth, right? All those years against the Steelers. But Kenny Pickett comes out here just cool hand Luke. Nothing shakes him. Nothing rattles him. And I mean, I hate to say that Troy Aikman, a Hall of Famer, can be overshadowed. And I don't want to say Kenny Pickett's a Hall of Famer, but it's just like the early observations is Troy Aikman was an accurate guy to me. The ball was always where it needed to be. And when I take a look at Kenny Pickett, and every time, especially now, even you were starting to see this last year's training camp. And this is where he began to kind of make that argument, especially when the preseason games started. He seemed like he was way more comfortable. And I mean, I know Aikman had some years where he wasn't a 60% completion guy. He was never like a 30 touchdowns guy. He threw a fair share of picks. I mean, 165 touchdowns lifetime to 141, even with guys like Michael Irvin, another Hall of Famer as a wide receiver. They were a run-first team, that wall of Dallas, with also with Emmitt Smith in the backfield. But this is the way I see the Steelers kind of playing out. And it's not to say that Dallas didn't have the defense too, and I know a lot of us are not. I don't like saying good things about Dallas as much as I did in Tom Brady or the Patriots. Obviously, the Steelers have their history in Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys and lost to that team. What was that, 95 team, 96 Super Bowl, something like that, Super Bowl 30. But it's what I see. And it's like, even when Troy was playing, Aikman that is, he still had he went to a Pro Bowl, but the guys he was always kind of in that competition with, Brett Favre being another one in that same era, were always thought of as more of the gunslingers. And he was just kind of it's kind of like how I said Ben Roethlisberger was a lot like John Elway. And this is the kind of stuff, that's the way I see Kenny progress. You know what I mean? Some people are going to knock his arm, they're going to knock his small hands. But every single thing I have to say here today on this, he puts the ball right on a dime. Everything is money when he's throwing the football. Bob Labriola, and it's tough to say this because there's a 2-minute drill. I don't know if I want to cover this yet or do it at the end. Maybe I'll just mention it twice here. So forgive me being a broken record, but freaky chair too. Got to work with what I got to work with. So Kenny Pickett ends his day with an interception on a 2-minute drill. And I forgot what the time was. I could pull up Labs' article. It probably says, but they get one timeout. They're in a 2-minute situation with a certain amount of clock. and the offense has to perform in this situation. There were referees there at camp on Thursday as well. So flags were being thrown. There was like a false start, I believe, and it reset the offense, et cetera, et cetera. But Kenny Pickett has a ball that he intends for Cody White. And Cody White's been around the team, practice squad and whatnot for a couple of seasons now. So it's not like he's not like a wide receiver 1. He's probably not even a wide receiver 6 in this whole grand scheme of things. But Kenny targets him, and he's being covered by Joey Porter Jr. Now, I'm going to keep calling this guy a first-round pick, and I remember telling everyone that pick 32 was actually pick 33 and is a second-round pick. But he should have been, or he is in that category of like a first-round pick type player. Joey Porter is impressive, and even throughout just the practice and from the things I've seen leading up to this point, to see it in person, he picks off this pass, and it would make it sound like okay, this is a very easy thing. This is Kenny's fault. And I started to I look over Brad and I'm like, that's on Cody White. However, it's not that simple. Joey Porter made a hell of a play. You got pros against pros, right? Pickett put the ball where, when, how it needed to be. Not overthrown, not underthrown. I think Cody wasn't necessarily tracking the ball to the best of his ability, or maybe, these are pros, these are the best of the best. He may not be on the level of some of the other guys, and that's where he's at, okay? And this is the mistake. But a lesser corner, this probably just falls for an incomplete pass. Porter, turns, and he just has some type of footwork where he comes back. It's hard to say because it sounded like a dive, but it wasn't like a full stretched out dive. It was like kind of half his body, his body was behind that ball. So if he doesn't catch with hands, and he may not have fully gotten it with his hands, but he definitely got his hands up out there and then hauled in this ball for an interception. That was one of his biggest knocks coming out of Penn State. And to see that transpire on the field the way it did, this was a grown-ass man throw from Kenny Pickett. That, if Ben makes this throw, Joey Porter is still making this play. That's just how good of a play it was by Porter. So I just want to kind of throw that out there, because then there's always the naysayers that are still not Kenny Pickett believers. I'm not a Kenny... Okay, I'm going to turn that around. I wasn't a Kenny Pickett truther, but more and more and more and more. You just heard my whole spiel about who I kind of compare his play to. Of course, Troy couldn't move around the field and be as mobile on his feet and move and throw on the run in the same way. It's a different era. Everybody had some of that kind of maybe an element or whatever, but it's not like guys today, you know what I mean? So anyways, one hell of a play, Joey Porter. Joey Porter, this whole training camp has been pretty much matched up with George Pickens. There's some times where George has moved around or maybe Porter's not out there, but these guys are battling on each other. And it was pretty much like, okay, who's going to win? This is the challenge. I'm going to put you guys up against one another, duke it out, and let's see what you guys got. And it has been just, it's pretty fierce. We saw the one catch that was made just the other day, and really George Pickens had no business coming down with this ball, but he still did. You could see it from just the image itself. Porter was in the right place to make this play, and George Pickens still made this play. Pickens is out there making some grown-ass man plays and looking like an incredible wide receiver 1 already in camp. But that's not to the detriment of Porter. He's not using him like a wet rag. Porter is getting the best of him at sometimes. And even so, let's say you put Porter up against Justin Jefferson, for example, from the Minnesota Vikings. And then Jefferson comes down with a ball, but you just saw that Porter was like everywhere in perfect position, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're like, well, that's Justin Jefferson. Well, that's the way we need to start thinking about George Pickens. Pickens is coming down and making some plays, coming down with the ball, making some plays. They're just inhuman. I don't want to call him Antonio Brown just yet, with size, Brown with size. But this dude has every chance to be able to do the same things, to ascend. And with the way Kenny is throwing the ball around the field, it's not just the Pickens, but in yesterday, of course, Deontay Johnson, Allen Robinson being off, but we've seen some plays with Allen Robinson already. We've seen some rapport there. It's going to be very dangerous. And there's some other names to throw into this offense too. So let me go through some other observations. I mean, not the most exciting thing in the world, but camp really started with, I'm sorry, I got like a really froggy throat today, and I had decent coffee. I'm not drinking like hotel coffee here. Actually got the McCafe. Okay, some of you won't call that decent coffee. But Jens will say the same thing about Starbucks, and that's not in the budget. But anyways, everything kind of started off, kicking off with some punt and kick return duties, and I'm interested in seeing who is still being utilized in that capacity, because there is a ton of wide receivers on this depth chart, and you just have like no idea who's going to be left as the last man standing when it's all said and done. And you're watching, let's see, 19. Got to remember it's not Juju Smith-Schuster anymore. You've got Calvin Austin the third, he's small. I mean, he's like a firefly, but he is so quicker than a hiccup. And I think that Austin is going to be the leading guy here. You've got a few other names that are in this mix, of course. Gunnar Olszewski's still out there. Cody White taking some of it. They had all the running backs doing the same drills too, and that's because, like, in previous Steelers seasons, I mean, kick returns, now that you have a fair catch too, Tomlin's usually putting like a backup running back out there. I don't even know if he'll risk Jalen Warren doing this, to be completely honest. So there's even like some of the camp bodies. Let me see, like Darius Hagans was out there. Anthony McFarland Jr. Now, if he makes the roster, he'll be a prime special teams guy. He's looked sharp. He looks like what's been pretty much promised and advertised by the team when they drafted him. We'll see. He was a practice squad guy last year, but Calvin Austin looks like the guy. Gunnar Olszewski is going to be in that mix as well. And then you've got Jordan Byrd, who was brought on this team as pretty much a return specialist only. But will the Steelers roster 6 wide receivers to keep somebody like Byrd? I mean, they really like Miles Boykin as a special teams guy. Excuse me. I really do apologize. It's like, this isn't, I feel like I'm not at my top of my game here, even though I got like the best content to give you guys today. Just trying to get along. What do you do for a living? I saw a meme earlier today and said, what do you do for a living? And it's like, I drink coffee and get by the best I can. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So Gunnar Olszewski, Calvin Austin, Jordan Byrd, those are the guys that are in that mix, Cody White. But when you're looking at the wide receiver depth chart, you got Deontay Johnson, you got George Pickens, you got Allen Robinson. There's 3 dudes right there, right? Your fourth is going to be probably Calvin Austin. They're not going to cut a second year guy that they invested, at least like he's a 4th round pick. So like a middle draft guy, you're gonna stick with them probably for the duration of the rookie contract, unless they're absolutely not good at all, you know. So then that's 4. And when you get down to, do they keep 5? Is there only one spot? Would it be Gunnar? Would it be Hakeem Butler? Miles Boykin is a special teams demon. I've seen him actually being praised as one of the best special teams players in the AFC North. That's pretty wild in and of itself. Hakeem Butler, I've got some notes here about him. Not the best showing on Thursday. And if that continues through from my observations, it sucks. He's got physical tools that cannot be taught when it comes to size and speed, but the mental and just being able to haul in some passes. He had a drop or 2. Just I think he even had a catch where like his 1 foot was like out of bounds. It's just like those are coachable things. I believe they can be coachable. So I'm not going to say he's necessarily out, but man, this isn't a roster where you could afford to have those kind of mistakes or mental lapses and still expect to make the team. So I had high expectations, or have high expectations for Hakeem Butler, but let's see where it goes from here. 7 shots. I mean, labs have reported you get a little more of a detail. You really only have Kenny Pickett, for the most part, Kenny Pickett running like the great majority of all of these reps, no matter what the exercise or drill might be. Conor Hayward is, I won't say heavily involved, but noticeably involved in this offense. A lot in the passing game, almost primarily in the passing game. Motion him out and like some short intermediate type routes that he's running. And that's where Pickett looked first for this, and it was incomplete. The defense was really stood out, even though a lot of the starters weren't there. You had guys like Elijah Riley and Kenny Robinson playing as your safeties. You had Chris Wilcox as one of the corners. You had a lot of heavy dose of Trey Norwood playing. Joey Porter's playing because he's a rookie. He's playing a lot. So, and a lot of this is mitigating the injury to Corey Trice. Levi Wallace was out there, but not in a heavy doses, or at least not noticeable. So he's probably just doing his job. You go back and look at film and it's like, oh, that guy wasn't open. So that's why he's not being targeted. Or people are, or maybe like, you know, there's direction from the coaches. Let's work on the new guy. Let's work on Porter. And Kenny's trying to get that rapport with Pickens. And I mean, Pickens is like, he's a guy that's just open. In the one touchdown they had in the 7 shots, I don't know how he did it. There's like a lot of traffic. You know what it's like in the red zone. It gets very congested. He's wide open. And I know like the level of competition, Robinson and Riley and stuff like that, but still, like, I don't understand how. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So Trey Norwood, a couple times, like, lined up on tight ends throughout practice, and he had a nice pass breakup on Pat Freiermuth. He had another, mind you, they only had like these, they didn't have full pads on yesterday. They're still wearing the helmets. They got like, you know, the bubble things or whatever you want to call on them. And I don't think I have like Norwood actually anywhere on this, but I mean, just to give you an idea what they look like with these things on. There it is. It's like the dark helmet or whatever from Spaceballs. But these are meant to protect the players. I mean, if he doesn't have this, he lit up Pat Freiermuth. There was like a collective groan and oh. And it was like both, because like it was like, oh, that was a hit. And then it was like, hey, knucklehead. But how you tell professional athletes to slow down too? You know, these guys, they're going full speed sometimes. And remind me to get back to that too. I think I'll have some notes about inside linebackers as well. Cole Holcomb and Quan Alexander. Holcomb's running a lot of the defense, first team defense. They both appear to be guys capable of having the green dot, calling the plays, and having the radio in their helmet. And that appears to be what the second team is being run with Alexander as a veteran, according to my observation. There's a high likelihood both of these guys are playing next to each other. I mean, I don't know. It's not to, what do you want to say, waylay or whatever with the Landon Roberts. I don't think either of the linebackers might be, both of those guys could be 3-down backs. I think the way the Steelers are going to operate, though, they're going to keep one. You got to keep Alexander healthy, especially. He's had some injury history, and Holcomb just came off of one too. So you got a stable of dudes, and that wasn't even like Mark Robinson, who was out there as well. So, and noticeably, I didn't notice any of the other linebackers during all this. It was mostly Quan wearing 26. So he's dual numbered with offensive player, which will be Anthony McFarland. And I don't know, Quan in 26 is a defensive player. I think only 26, the old Rod Woodson number, has only been issued to Le'Veon Bell and offensive players, unless it's an off-season thing like this. So we'll see if that number remains like semi-retired. It's about the only way you can do it as you go forward. I mean, it's really cool to do like you're not going to give out like number 7 for Ben or anything like that. You have a little more control over that. And that's like a very exclusive number, as is Terry Bradshaw's 12. And some others, Mean Joe Green's is physically retired. You're not getting 75 no matter what. And I got a few others they haven't reissued, but it'll be interesting to see if they ever flip these through. Like you go through, 36 isn't being used. You jump straight from 35 Luke Barku to 37 Elijah Riley and 38 Greg Bell. And it's like, okay, who are all these guys? And another 38 dual rostered with Madre Harper. That's the way you got to do it. Most of these guys aren't going to be 53-man roster candidates at the end of this process anyways. So I just chuckle. Don't go buying Quan Alexander jerseys yet, is basically the moral of this story. Speaking of, Chris Wilcox had a nice breakup on Calvin Austin, and I like when people don't realize that Jalen Warren, number 30, who's sharing that number as well, isn't the guy that's out there. So the things you overhear at camp, like Del Monte KZ, yeah, about that. It's DeMonte Casey, folks. So yeah, it was nice. We got to see a lot of Conor Hayward, shifty. We'll see how he holds up in pass protection if they do use him in a traditional fullback role, or if he could kind of pave the way for any of the running backs. You can't get a real sense for that when they're not in pads. They'll have some more to come back around to on that. Mike Tomlin. I got a lot of notes on Mike Tomlin. There was Mitch Trubisky had thrown an incomplete pass. Now I'm trying to see who it was for, and there was a flag. And I want to say maybe it was Kenny Robinson. I think it was. I think I have 41, and I just scribbled my notes here. And Tomlin was very vocal. He's like, the flag got thrown. It was obvious pass interference with the referees there. Tomlin, you got that? You got that? Like, you know, barking instructions, walking around the perimeter of the field, back behind like the field goal posts and whatnot. There was a play too where Robinson has to come back out, and he's going over number 80. And you don't have to look up who number 80 is. Once you see him on the field, you realize, holy shit. Darnell Washington. Okay, on paper, right here, Darnell Washington listed as 6'7", 264, which is, you know, compared to 6'8", 265, Zach Gentry, who's got an inch and a pound on him, you know, on paper. The weight is not carried the same way with Washington. They've been calling him Mount Washington. You've heard about the reps where TJ Watt wasn't getting past him, and he's a tight end, but he's still capable of, he's got to be working on these routes or whatever. I said he'd make a good dance partner. He looks very light on his feet. It's very athletic. He got wide. They sent him out wide, clearing out the safety, Robinson, and just looking at the size mismatch. Kenny Robinson, 6'2", 200, giving up about 5-6 inches, about a half foot, and 50 pounds. And this isn't the only tight end the Steelers have. Like, they have Freiermuth still. This is very scary, like, offensive weapons that have been amassed here. And I picked up my Lindy's book. It's over here somewhere. It's a rag every year. It's a tradition, though. I like picking it up. They have the Steelers picked to be 4th again in the division. They make a lot of, like, him-hawing about, you know, is Kenny going to be the guy? And if Kenny is the guy, then the Steelers will have postseason hopes, blah, blah, blah. Just everything that's around them. I mean, as long as Kenny doesn't collapse, it's going to be very scary to see what this offense is capable of doing. Mount Washington is very, for those not familiar, Mount Washington across from the river, you could see, you know, if you ever looked at the scoreboard at Acrisure Stadium, still tough to say that. And it's an apropos nickname for Darnell Washington. So just wait until you see this guy. You're going to be very excited. Kenny Pickett. Got a lot of notes about Kenny Pickett to George Pickens. Reads off. He finds Pickens. Pickens and Joey Porter. A lot of hand fighting, and it's an incomplete pass. And maybe one of them was actually a complete pass. You got flags going whichever way. These guys are like, they're really going at it. Mitch Trubisky, still tough to see anything that works in the pass game. It's night and day between him and Kenny Pickett. And it's not to rag on Mitch. I'm just glad that Mitch is now firmly like a backup guy. Because if this was who you had to hitch your wagons to for another season, as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and as this team, it'd be very rough to say all the positive things. I don't care if it's George Pickens. I don't care if it's Washington. I don't care if it's Freiermuth. I don't even care if it's Najee Harris. It's tough. He's just got the happy feet and reading the field, and he still makes, I say, like when you're watching baseball and you've got the box, right, for the strike zone. If you could put a strike zone on a safe area to throw the ball, which is almost always low and outside the frame of the offensive player, either behind, like he doesn't lead a lot of guys. His anticipation, like Kenny's throws, like the reason Porter was able to pick that ball off, that ball was anticipated to where White should have been. And that's a very clear distinction that I didn't make earlier, is because Mitch just doesn't do that. Mitch should still move around. He's still mobile, but he's not like, he doesn't anticipate with his throws. So you get a lot of throws that end up in the dirt or incomplete, like off of fingertips and stuff like that. It's out of sync. It's not as clean as you would like it to be, but he's still valuable. You could do worse. I saw some of the same, maybe with Mason Rudolph, but one was like a really deep pass that just didn't go anywhere. And who knows who he's on the page with when you're talking about, like, there's a Fitzpatrick and I think a Bradley that are somewhere. Jamarcus Bradley and Des Fitzpatrick wide receivers. Like, there's not a whole lot to like report or talk about there. And I hate to say, well, you shouldn't even bother because blah, blah, blah. Yeah, these guys are still human beings and deserve their due wherever it is. I had a note about, oh yeah, Trey Norwood up against Hakeem Butler. And Butler is big. That's another matchup that was very similar to what I was talking about. Butler 6'5", 227. Norwood listed at 6 foot, probably with lifts in his shoes, and 194. I mean, it was a huge size mismatch, but still Norwood getting the better of that. Let's see, Jordan Bird, he got a pass interference call in his favor, which was pretty nice. That'll behoove him well if they ever have to use him, because Gunnar Olszewski last year, whether or not you know it or not, played a career high amount of snaps as a wide receiver. He was not utilized as much in that position when he was in New England, just primarily just a return guy. So if somebody can beat him not only in the return game for that job, but can also provide more on the offensive side of the ball, they clearly used him for some of they had plans for him, then his job, he's got a hot seat job, because it's that returner and that if there's 6 wide receiver, that's if he makes it, there's going to be somebody else that's going to be capable, just like Steven Sims was last year, just in case there's another mistake. You're not going to get 2 after that. You know what I mean? You make one, once the second one, it's going to be and maybe happy trails. Again, Trey Norwood, or no, this one's Joey Porter. I'm sorry, not Trey Norwood on this one. Joey Porter, breaking up a pass from Kenny Pickett to Zach Gentry, which was really nice. And that kind of led into, that was the 2-minute drills. And shortly into this is when Kenny Pickett got picked off by Porter. Didn't look like this particular 2-minute drill, they were moving the ball and they had the right tempo or whatever, but this is where Mitch Trubisky really excels. It's kind of like, almost like I don't want to say Ben Roethlisberger, because they're nothing of the same category of player, but you start drawing stuff in the dirt and it seems like Mitch might be a little more comfortable with it. He had like a really nice he had a nice play to, I'm trying to think who the other tight end is now, because it's like some of these guys are so far down on the roster. There's only like 4 of them in camp. And Ronnie Williams. And it was like a play that was like very similar to the overtime in Cincinnati last year in week 1, where Mitch was operating, like a hurry up offense. And it really fit his style, but the pattern of this was like all day long was backs and tight ends. And it worked much the same way with Mitch Trubisky running the 2-minute drill here. He finds Darnell Washington twice. I think he missed him on another one. Washington was just getting open, and there was another one where he's just a man amongst men, and then he plows into the end zone. I almost wonder if it was busted coverage or if he just got that wide open. But Darnell Washington, an absolute dude. I have nothing but praise for him this entire, just observing him. And it was somebody that, myself and Brian, we were really high on in the draft process. And man, I can't be any more than high and bullish on him right now as well. Mitch Trubisky, my dude, he's not really a scan the middle of the field guy. And those throws that he usually makes in the middle of the field, it's almost always like a Conor Hayward or a running back, or he found Washington down the field though. Like he's capable. He sees, maybe it's because the tight ends are so much taller. There's got to be something with it, but it's like, is that his security blanket? I don't know. So you got some real winners and losers. I don't want to ever say losers. I felt like really the only guy that had like a down practice, maybe Keem Butler, stood out a little more. And was the other drop that was there? I think that was Butler. Yeah, Hakeem Butler from Mitch Trubisky. So Butler from Trubisky was a drop from Butler, and Mike Tomlin very vocal during this. Routine plays routinely. I believe that's the exact quote, but he's saying, you know, you got to make these routine plays routinely. And it's really difficult when you've got somebody like George Pickens that's out there and making the impossible seem ordinary. That you just, you can't afford to have those type of plays on your resume. And that's where I'm at right now with Hakeem Butler. So Pickens is an obvious winner. Kenny Pickett, obvious winner. God, it's Kenny looks like Kenny franchise right now. And now I'm starting to worry about whether he should have a red jersey. Steelers don't do the red jersey non-contact stuff. They don't need to, but maybe for a preseason game, we need to start thinking that way. I know he still needs reps as a second-year player, but I don't want him anywhere in danger. We had that scare last year. Was that Arden Key with the Jacksonville Jaguars game? Joey Porter Jr., definite winner, so lean. The guy just, he's like a little, like, I don't want to say baby giraffe I usually use for words because they crisscross their legs. Guy's a gazelle. Very impressive. Trey Norwood also looking really good too. He's getting some reps that he really needs. Quan Alexander. Guy is freakishly fast. They're going to be able to blitz with him too. I'm very impressed. Cole Holcomb gets there too, so I don't want to like rag on Holcomb, but what an addition Alexander is going to end up being for this team. I don't see anything but upside here with that. Not a lot of like offensive line and defensive drills with some of this stuff too, so just kind of keep that in mind. I didn't have a lot of observations other than Nick Herbig looked really good. Like his pass rush moves look really good. You're in shorts, but shout out to Nick there, especially with TJ sitting out on a veteran day. I think Highsmith did too. I think I mentioned that. Darnell Washington, absolute beast. Got to see Keanu Benton after practice. Guy as thick as a tree trunk, like legs and arms, just, you know, arms for legs or legs for arms, as they would say. He just, it's amazing, like, too, like, when you see guys in and out of gear. I mean, he's thick. Isaiah Loudermilk's still a big dude, but Isaiah Loudermilk, Larry Ogunjobi, these guys are, like, trim and really fit for being as big as they are. Loudermilk, 6'7", 293. So very, very trim looking guy, very athletic looking. Conor Hayward's in my category of guys that impressed too. Probably going to say I'm going to throw everybody down there. Not everybody, but those are the few that I could definitely say, observing, that made an impression. And I think I'm going to leave it at that, folks. Friday Night Lights right here around the corner. We're going to see, let's see, like, the iron sharpen iron. You know, Trey Norwood's a third-year player now. He was a 7th-round pick, but a third-year player. Let's see how he goes up against maybe, like, if he gets in there with, like, a Deontay Johnson or somebody else like that. He has some opportunities, but guys that were sitting out. Let's see what it looks like. I like the Porter and Pickens stuff. It's very impressive to see those guys battle. And I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I missed. Nope, caught the inside linebackers. That's about it. So thank you for joining us as usual. Thank you for putting up with, you know, I'm in parts unknown here. I'm not going to disclose my location. There's probably people outside the room, like with their ear pressed. They might be listening, but like, who the hell's this guy? But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate you, no matter where you're watching or listening from. Until next time, early next week, I'll have several more sheets of this, and I can't wait to see some backs on backers under the lights. That's the main event, man. So that's definitely the main event. There'll be lots of good stuff to talk about there and going forward. So until next time, my name's Joe Kuzma. Thank you for watching and listening to the Steel City Underground podcast, no matter where you may be. And as we always do, we encourage our listeners and viewers to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.